A female empath is not difficult because she creates chaos. She is difficult because she notices the chaos that already exists in people. That changes everything. Most men are prepared to deal with attraction, beauty, chemistry, and conversation. But many are not prepared to deal with someone who can feel what they are hiding. That's what makes an empath unsettling. She doesn't just hear words. She reads hesitation, energy shifts, facial tension, and emotional contradiction. She notices what a person is trying not to reveal. The first reason many men struggle with a female empath is that she sees through emotional masks. A lot of people are trained to perform confidence. They know how to say the right thing, how to act strong, how to appear detached. But an empath often senses when confidence is an act. She can feel the anxiety under the joke, the anger behind silence, or the fear hidden inside arrogance. That makes emotional performance useless. The second reason is that empathy DA, man's emotional accountability. A woman with deep empathy often remembers patterns. She notices what someone says, but she also notices what they consistently do. If a man says he cares but repeatedly withdraws, she sees that contradiction immediately. That can make someone feel exposed. And when people feel exposed, they often blame the person who noticed. The third reason is emotional intensity. Female empaths often experience connection at a deeper level than many expect. She is not simply dating the person, she is sensing motives, wounds, and emotional history. For a man who is used to staying on the surface, that level of connection can feel overwhelming. It's not because she is too much, it's because she is reaching places he hasn't explored within himself. The fourth reason is that an empath reflects truth back to people. Most individuals avoid certain truths about themselves. Maybe it's emotional immaturity, selfishness, fear of commitment, or unresolved trauma. A female empath often becomes a mirror. Without trying, she reveals what someone has buried. That mirror can create growth, but only if the person is willing to look. The fifth reason is boundaries. There's a myth that empaths tolerate everything. Real empaths often give deeply, but once trust is broken repeatedly, they pull back completely. Many men misread compassion as unlimited patience. They assume forgiveness means access. But an empath can detach the moment she recognizes manipulation. That shift surprises people who thought kindness meant weakness. The sixth reason is emotional honesty. A female empath usually values authenticity over image. She often asks questions that cut beneath normal conversation. She wants to know motives, fears, and emotional truths. Men who are uncomfortable with vulnerability may interpret this as pressure. But what she's actually doing is creating emotional closeness. The problem is that closeness requires honesty, and honesty reveals discomfort. The seventh round. Reason is she senses inconsistency before proof exists. This creates confusion. She may feel something is wrong before there is evidence. She notices a change in tone, timing, energy, or emotional distance. Many dismiss this as overthinking, until later events prove she was right. That intuition can feel threatening because it removes the ability to hide for long. The eighth reason is she changes emotional dynamics. Being with a female empath often forces a man to grow emotionally. He can no longer rely only on charm, distraction, or silence. He has to communicate, self-reflect, and become emotionally present. That requires maturity. If he lacks that, the relationship becomes uncomfortable. Not because she caused dysfunction, but because she exposed it. A female empath is not hard to love. She is hard to deceive. She is hard to manipulate. She is hard to keep at a distance while expecting emotional access. That's why some men call her complicated. In reality, she is often simply aware. The truth is, an empath doesn't create insecurity in a person. She reveals the insecurity already there. And that revelation is either the beginning of emotional growth or the reason someone walks away. An empath often notices emotions long before they are spoken. That is what makes the connection feel so intense for many people around them. While most conversations happen through words, an empath is paying attention to what lives underneath those words. They are watching the pause before an answer, the slight shift in eye contact, the forced smile, the tone that changes for only a second. Those small signals reveal emotional truths that someone may be trying to keep hidden. Many men are taught from an early age to hide certain emotions. Fear, sadness, insecurity, rejection, and vulnerability are often treated as things that should remain private or controlled. Over time, this creates a habit of emotional concealment. Some become skilled at presenting strength even when they feel lost inside. Others learn to use humor, silence, or detachment to avoid revealing pain. To most people, those defenses appear normal, but an empath often senses the emotion beneath the performance. This can be deeply uncomfortable. When someone spends years learning how to protect their inner world, meeting a person who can sense that world without permission can feel unsettling. It is not that the empath is reading thoughts. It is that emotions leave traces. Tension in the jaw, changes in breathing, shifts in posture, and inconsistent facial expressions all communicate what a person feels. An empath naturally notices these signals, often without consciously analyzing them. They simply feel that something does not match. This creates a unique emotional dynamic. A man may say he is fine, but the empath senses frustration. He may claim he does not care, but she feels disappointment in the silence that follows. He may act confident, but she notices the insecurity hidden in his need for control. The empath is not necessarily confronting him with accusations. She simply responds to what she feels, and that response can make him feel seen in a way he did not expect. For some, this creates a powerful bond. Being understood without explaining can feel rare and deeply comforting. It creates the sense that someone truly understands what is happening internally. But for others, it creates resistance. Being emotionally seen can feel like losing control. If someone is not comfortable facing their own emotions, they may become defensive around the person who notices them. This is why empaths are often misunderstood. Their sensitivity is sometimes mistaken for being dramatic or overly analytical. In reality, they are often observing emotional patterns that others ignore. They are not inventing feelings, they are responding to signals that are already present. The discomfort comes because many people are not used to someone recognizing what they work hard to hide. The empath's perception becomes a mirror. It reflects emotions that have been pushed down, denied, or disguised. That mirror can bring closeness when someone is ready to be honest. But when someone is avoiding their own emotional truth, it can create distance. The empath did not create the hidden feeling. She simply recognized it. And sometimes being recognized at that level is more revealing than a person is prepared to handle. Emotional depth has a way of reaching places that many people spend years trying not to confront. When someone enters a relationship with genuine emotional awareness, honesty, and sensitivity, it often brings more than comfort. It brings exposure. A deeply connected person does not only enjoy the pleasant parts of connection, they naturally touch the hidden parts too. That can trigger insecurities that were never resolved, especially in someone who has learned to avoid difficult emotions rather than understand them. Many insecurities remain hidden until real closeness begins. A person may appear confident, independent, and emotionally stable on the surface. They may function well in daily life, handle responsibilities, and maintain relationships without obvious problems. But true emotional depth changes the environment. It invites trust, vulnerability, and honesty. In that kind of connection, old fears begin to surface. Fear of rejection, fear of not being enough, fear of abandonment, or fear of being fully known often emerge only when someone feels emotionally close to another person. This happens because deep connection removes emotional distance. Emotional distance allows insecurities to stay hidden. Someone can keep conversations casual, avoid vulnerable topics, and maintain a version of themselves that feels safe. But emotional depth breaks through that protective layer. When a person asks meaningful questions, notices emotional shifts, or offers genuine understanding, it becomes harder to hide behind emotional defenses. The parts that were fully managed begin to show. For many men, unresolved insecurities are often tied to identity. They may have learned to associate worth with control, competence, emotional strength, or being perceived as stable. A relationship with emotional depth can challenge those beliefs. If a woman notices fear behind confidence or pain behind silence, it can create discomfort because it exposes a side of him he may not fully accept in himself. Her awareness is not creating weakness. It is revealing what already existed beneath the surface. This can lead to emotional withdrawal. Instead of moving toward the connection, some pull away because closeness begins to feel threatening. They may become distant, irritable, or confused by their own reactions. Often they cannot explain why. The issue is not always the relationship itself. The issue is what the relationship awakens internally. Emotional depth activates feelings that have been buried, and buried emotions rarely remain quiet when true intimacy appears. An empathic or emotionally aware woman often becomes a trigger for self-reflection without even trying. Her questions, her attention, and her emotional honesty create an atmosphere where avoidance becomes difficult. She may notice patterns in his behavior that others ignored. She may recognize insecurity hidden behind defensiveness, or loneliness hidden behind independence. That level of awareness can feel comforting if someone is emotionally mature. But if those insecurities have never been faced, it can feel deeply unsettling. The person may begin projecting discomfort outward. Instead of recognizing that old fears are being activated, they may decide the relationship is too intense or that the other person is asking too much. This is common when unresolved insecurity meets emotional depth. The problem is not necessarily the connection. The problem is that the connection reveals emotional wounds that were previously easier to ignore. Emotional depth acts like pressure on hidden fractures. It does not create the fracture, it reveals where it already exists. The stronger the connection becomes, the more those unresolved parts rise to the surface. Some choose to face them and grow. Others retreat because the reflection feels too personal. That is why deep emotional connection can feel life-changing for some and overwhelming for others. It reaches beyond attraction and conversation. It touches identity, fear, and the truth someone has not yet made peace with. Many people misunderstand empathy because they judge it by appearance rather than by what it actually requires. Empathy often looks gentle. It can appear patient, compassionate, and emotionally open. Because of that, some men mistakenly interpret it as weakness. They assume someone who listens deeply, forgives, or responds with kindness must lack boundaries or strength. But empathy is not the absence of strength. In many cases, it is a form of strength that is harder to recognize because it does not rely on force, control, or dominance. This confusion often begins with how emotional behavior is viewed. Some men are taught that strength means staying detached, controlling emotions, or never appearing affected. In that mindset, sensitivity becomes associated with vulnerability, and vulnerability becomes associated with weakness. So when they encounter a woman who understands emotions deeply, who notices pain in others, and who chooses compassion over reaction, they may assume she is easier to manipulate or less likely to defend herself. That assumption is often wrong. Empathy allows a person to understand what others feel, but it also allows them to recognize intentions. A female empath often notices dishonesty, manipulation, and emotional inconsistency quickly. She may not confront it immediately, which leads some to believe she does not see it. In reality, she may be observing, processing, and deciding how much trust to offer. Her calm response is often mistaken for ignorance, when it is actually awareness. This misunderstanding creates a dangerous dynamic. Some men may test boundaries, believing empathy means tolerance. They may push limits, act inconsistently, or expect repeated forgiveness. They confuse patience with permission. Because an empath often gives understanding before judgment, others may believe she will accept any behavior. But empathy does not mean accepting disrespect. It means understanding why someone behaves the way they do while still recognizing when that behavior is harmful. The reason empathy is misread is because it is quiet. It does not always announce itself with confrontation. It can remain calm while seeing everything. That calm can make others underestimate the person in front of them. A man may think he has emotional control over the relationship because she is not reacting dramatically. But while he assumes he is leading the emotional dynamic, she may already understand his fears, motives, and patterns more clearly than he understands hers. Empathy also requires emotional resilience. To feel deeply, understand others, and remain compassionate in difficult situations takes a level of internal stability many overlook. It is easier to shut down emotions than to stay open to them. It is easier to avoid painful conversations than to face them honestly. The empath chooses awareness, even when that awareness includes discomfort. That is not weakness. That is emotional courage. Many men only realize this after the empath withdraws. While she is present, they may assume her kindness will continue regardless of their behavior. But once trust is broken repeatedly, the empath often becomes distant very quickly. She may stop explaining, stop pursuing, and stop offering emotional access. That shift surprises those who believed her empathy meant endless tolerance. They discover too late that understanding someone's pain does not mean staying where respect is absent. Empathy can appear soft, but softness and weakness, SS, are not the same. Softness is a choice. Weakness is a lack of ability. A female empath may choose gentleness, but she is often deeply aware of everything happening beneath the surface. She may know more than she says and understand more than she reveals. The mistake many make is assuming that because she responds with compassion, she lacks power. In reality, empathy often gives her the power to see what others are trying to hide, and that awareness changes the entire relationship dynamic. A female empath often influences a relationship in ways that are never openly discussed. She may not create formal rules, make demands, or explain expectations in direct terms, yet her presence establishes a kind of emotional standard that others can feel. These standards are often silent because they are not spoken as instructions. They are communicated through consistency, awareness, and the way she naturally responds to honesty, respect, and emotional presence. People around her begin to realize that certain behaviors are felt immediately, even when nothing is said. This happens because an empath pays attention to emotional integrity. She notices whether words match actions, whether affection is genuine, and whether communication feels sincere. She may not challenge every inconsistency out loud, but she notices it. That awareness creates a subtle pressure in the relationship. The other person begins to sense that surface-level behavior will not be enough. Charm, rehearsed responses, and temporary effort may work with someone focused only on appearances. But with an empath, the emotional reality underneath becomes impossible to ignore. Her standards are silent because they are often modeled rather than demanded. She may communicate openly, listen carefully, remember emotional details, and show concern in meaningful ways. Without saying it directly, she demonstrates what emotional presence looks like. She creates a standard by how she treats connection itself. The person with her may begin to feel that they should show the same honesty, depth, or attentiveness. If they are not used to emotional accountability, this can create discomfort they do not fully understand. Many men notice this as a kind of pressure, even when no direct pressure exists. A female empath may simply ask thoughtful questions, notice changes in mood, or respond deeply to emotional topics. But that behavior can make someone feel measured against an unspoken expectation. If he avoids vulnerability, her openness highlights that avoidance. If he says one thing and behaves another way, her awareness reveals the contradiction. She does not need to accuse him. Her perception alone creates a mirror, and that mirror can make someone aware of their own emotional gaps. The silent standard often centers on authenticity. A female empath tends to value what is real over what looks impressive. She is often less influenced by status, performance, or image than by emotional consistency. That means the usual ways some people maintain control in relationships may not work. Emotional withdrawal, strategic silence, or superficial charm may lose their effectiveness because she notices the emotional intent behind them. This can unsettle someone who relies on those patterns to avoid deeper connection. Another reason these standards feel powerful is because they expose effort. An empath often recognizes when someone is being emotionally present only when convenient. She notices when attention increases after distance, when apologies lack real accountability, or when affection appears only when access is threatened. She may remain calm, but that calm does not mean she is unaware. The person begins to realize they are being understood beyond words, and that realization creates a sense that something deeper is expected. These standards are not about perfection. An empath usually understands that people have flaws, fears, and emotional limitations. What matters is sincerity, she often respectively responds more positively to honest imperfection than to polished avoidance. If someone admits fear, confusion, or insecurity, she may feel closer to them. But if someone hides behind control while pretending authenticity, the emotional distance grows. Her standard is not that someone must never struggle. It is that they must be real. This can challenge men who are used to relationships that remain on the surface. A female empath changes that environment simply by being herself. She creates a space where emotional truth becomes visible, and once that standard exists, pretending becomes exhausting. Her expectations may never be announced, but they are present in everything she notices. The result is that others either rise toward greater honesty or retreat from the discomfort of being emotionally seen. Emotional honesty has a way of revealing things that are usually hidden beneath routine behavior. when someone communicates openly about what they feel, what they need, and what they notice. In a relationship, it changes the dynamic. It removes the protective fog that often allows people to avoid difficult truths. In many relationships, avoidance survives because no one directly addresses what is happening beneath the surface. But when emotional honesty enters the connection, patterns that were once subtle become impossible to ignore. Avoidance often depends on ambiguity. A person who avoids emotional closeness may not openly say they are afraid of intimacy. Instead, they may become inconsistent, delay communication, change subjects when conversations become serious, or create emotional distance after moments of closeness. These behaviors can go unnoticed for a long time when the other person is focused only on surface interactions. But emotional honesty brings those patterns into view because it asks direct questions and responds to emotional shifts instead of ignoring them. A person who is emotionally honest often says what many leave unsaid. They may acknowledge tension on after a conversation, mention that someone seems distant, or express when something feels inconsistent. They are not trying to create conflict. They are simply responding to what is present. This can make avoidance visible because the person who relies on emotional withdrawal no longer controls the unspoken narrative. Their behavior is being recognized and named. For many men, avoidance is not always intentional in a manipulative sense. Sometimes it develops as self-protection. Past rejection, betrayal, emotional neglect, or fear of vulnerability can create habits of distance. A man may pull away when things become emotionally meaningful because closeness activates fears he has not resolved. He may not even understand why he changes. But emotional honesty from another person often shines a light on that shift. She notices the withdrawal after intimacy, the silence after connection, or the defensiveness after emotional questions. That awareness can feel deeply uncomfortable because it interrupts avoidance. Avoidance works when the behavior remains unexamined. If someone can disappear emotionally, return later, and never discuss the pattern, they maintain control over the distance. But when another person calmly says, "You become distant whenever things get real," the pattern is exposed. The behavior that once stayed hidden now has language attached to it. That can create resistance, denial, or defensiveness because the person is now confronted with their own emotional strategy. Emotional honesty also reveals contradictions between words and actions. Someone may say they care deeply, but consistently avoid vulnerable conversations. They may say they want commitment, but withdraw when emotional intimacy increases. These contradictions often remain hidden because words create reassurance. But emotionally honest people pay attention to consistency. They compare what is said with what is repeated through behavior. Once those two do not align, the pattern becomes clear. A female empath often accelerates this process because she notices subtle changes before they become obvious. She may sense emotional distance in tone, body language, or energy before the person even recognizes it in themselves. When she responds honestly to what she feels, avoidance patterns become visible earlier. She might ask why someone is emotionally absent even while physically present. She might recognize that jokes are being used to deflect vulnerable conversations. Her awareness brings hidden patterns to the surface. This exposure can create two outcomes. For someone willing to grow, it can become a turning point. They may begin recognizing how they protect themselves from closeness and choose to change. But for someone deeply attached to avoidance, emotional honesty can feel threatening. They may label the other person as intense, difficult, or overanalyzing because it is easier to criticize awareness than confront personal patterns. Emotional honesty does not create avoidance. It reveals it. It removes excuses, exposes repetition, and makes emotional distance visible. That is why it can feel so powerful in relationships. It forces the hidden to become seen. And once a pattern is seen clearly, pretending it is not there becomes much harder. A true empath changes the emotional environment simply by being present. They often do not set out to challenge anyone or force transformation, yet their awareness naturally creates it. The reason is simple. An empath notices what many overlook. They sense emotional tension, hidden pain, inconsistency, and unspoken fear. That level of perception creates a relationship where avoidance becomes harder to maintain. People around them are often confronted with parts of themselves they have spent years ignoring, and that confrontation leads in one of two directions: emotional growth or emotional retreat. Growth begins when someone allows themselves to be seen. An empath often creates a space where emotions can surf, safely. They listen without immediate judgment, they notice subtle shifts in mood, and they often understand what someone feels before it is explained. For a person ready to face themselves, this can be deeply healing. It becomes easier to admit fear, insecurity, sadness, or confusion. When someone responds with understanding instead of criticism, the relationship becomes a place where emotional honesty is possible. But emotional honesty is rarely comfortable at first. Many people are used to controlling how others see them. They manage impressions, hide vulnerability, and present the strongest version of themselves. A true empath often sees beyond that. She notices the pain behind confidence, the loneliness behind independence, and the fear beneath anger. She may never say all of it out loud, but her awareness changes the interaction. The person realizes they are not being understood only by what they say. They are being understood by what they try not to show. This creates a turning point. Some begin to grow because they feel safe enough to stop pretending. They start recognizing patterns in themselves. They notice why they shut down after closeness, why they become defensive when vulnerable, or why they withdraw when someone gets too close. The empath becomes a mirror that reflects emotional truths. That reflection can lead to maturity, deeper communication, and real intimacy. But only if the person is willing to look honestly at what they see. For others, that same reflection creates retreat. Emotional retreat happens when the discomfort of being seen becomes stronger than the desire to connect. The person may feel exposed without understanding why. They may become distant, critical, or emotionally unavailable. Often they describe the empath as intense, complicated, or too much. In reality, the issue is not the empath's behavior. The issue is that the relationship is revealing emotional realities they are not prepared to face. Retreat is a defense mechanism, SM. It protects old wounds from being touched. If someone carries unresolved abandonment, shame, rejection, or betrayal, deep emotional connection can activate those memories. An empath often reaches those hidden places simply by creating closeness. She asks questions, notices shifts, and remains emotionally present. This presence can trigger feelings someone thought were long buried. Instead of facing those emotions, some choose distance. They pull back because separation feels safer than exposure. What makes an empath powerful is not control but awareness. She does not force growth through pressure. She does it by seeing clearly. Her calm attention reveals patterns others can no longer deny. She notices when someone says they care but acts detached. She sees when affection disappears after intimacy. She senses when silence is not peace but avoidance. That awareness removes emotional hiding places. The person then faces a choice. They can become more honest with themselves, confront what they fear, and grow through the connection. Or they can retreat, protect the old defenses, and leave the relationship emotionally unchanged. The empath did not cause either outcome. She simply made emotional truth visible. That is why being with a true empath can feel transformative. She does not demand change, but change becomes difficult to avoid. Her presence exposes emotional patterns that were hidden, and once those patterns are seen, the relationship becomes a crossroads. Some move toward healing. Others move away from the mirror.